Hello and welcome, class. Good to see you virtually here for another week of Old Testament and Hebrew literature. So let's go to your class and highlight a few announcements. Okay, let's see if you can see this. Okay, everybody. Today we're going to be talking about the introduction to the Pentateuch, and then we're also going to talk about the chapter on Exodus. Please make sure that you also complete your discussion post for this week. I graded your discussion post from last week, and then I'll be grading your assignments tomorrow. So make sure that you look out for those grades coming up. All right, everybody, let's get into the introduction of the Pentateuch. And what I want you to do also, as you are watching the video, pause it. You can pick up your textbook, as well as if you have a paper Bible, that would be good so you can follow along. Okay, so this is the chapter I want you to focus on, Introduction to the Pentateuch. I want you to go to your Bible, and if you have a chance, just go there and examine the first 5 books of the Old Testament. The first 5 books. So last week we talked about the beginning, about Genesis, about some of the key players there. We talked about the beginning of the Jewish faith. We talked about creation and things like that in the book of Genesis. So if you would, you can take a look at a paper Bible, or even if you have it on your phone, examine the first 5 books. So the first 5 books of the Old Testament are called the Pentateuch, okay? The Pentateuch. And this means 5. So penta, like the Pentagon, in DC, or the Pentagon, the shape is 5 sides. So Pentateuch is means 5 scrolls, and those are the 5 books. So the first 5 books are Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy. Okay, those are important to know. The Jewish people called this set the Torah, the Torah. And these first 5 books are historical, but they, as well as really kind of lay a foundation for the Jewish faith, as well as a foundation for the Christian faith. So remember also, as we're highlighting in the Old Testament, these individuals are not considered Christian per se, because Jesus isn't on the scene. Jesus Christ, Jesus comes on the scene in the New Testament. Jesus was a Jew, right? Of Jewish ancestry, but as Jesus came on the scene and started something new, hence those people who followed Christ or Christ's teachings became or were called Christians. All right. So if you would, you can follow along in your textbook, but you can see figure 3.1 on page 58 of your textbook. This will also give you a little bit more of the story of the Pentateuch. Like, what is this all about? So for example, remember last week we talked about Genesis, which is the first book, which talks about creation. In the first book of the Bible, you see that we have humanity. They come on the scene. They're created by the Creator God, but it doesn't take them long to fall into sin. And the book of Genesis lets people know that every human is prone to sin. Every human is prone to sin. They're just going to do what they want to do. We all do. Okay. And once again, also in the book of Genesis, you see that God does not leave people alone. God doesn't leave humans alone, but continues to build covenant with individuals. For example, Abraham continues to show up for individuals, especially, let's say, for example, Noah, Joseph, continues to show up, continues to bless, and continues to guide humans through their trials. In the book of Exodus, we see Exodus, and we'll talk about a little bit later, Exodus meaning exit. So the Jewish people have, at the end of Genesis, gone into bondage, right? And so humans They did wrong. Yes, they're living in a life of bondage, but the book of Exodus also allows us to see that even when people may be in a bad situation, literally like in prison, in sin, in jail, in some kind of messed up situation, right? God still desires to have a relationship with them, still desires to come close to them, still desires to be in communication with them, and just have a real pure relationship. Leviticus is one of those hard books. It deals with the law. So it's almost like a law book. And in the book of Leviticus, God really just explains like these are, listen, gotta pull you together. These are the set of laws that you need to live by. We're going to talk a little bit more about Leviticus later. It's a hard book to preach from, but also people need to understand the context. A lot of the laws in the book of Leviticus are not going to make any sense to us, and we have to understand the context of which it came from. Okay. The people of Israel in Book of Numbers, the people in Israel find themselves, I'm getting caught off right here, in a census. Okay. They're caught in a census. And let me see if I can pause this right here. Let me see if I can download it so that everything comes up on the screen. But the Book of Numbers is just that you get a census, and now these individuals are moving to different places, and we want to see who's there. We want to see how God is blessing these different tribes. Let me see if I can get this back on the screen. And let me see if I can come back to you now. All right. Okay. Let's see if that works. Some of my wording was coming off the screen there. Do this. Okay, that's not working. Okay, maybe that helped. All right. Okay, team, let's move through. Let me scroll back down to where I finished. We talk about the book of Numbers, and then we have Deuteronomy. What I want you to understand also in the Pentateuch, that's the first 5 books, right, is that we have a lot of different types of writings in the Pentateuch. And what I want you to do is, we would have been able to do this if we had more people online. We could talk to each other, but I want you to read Exodus chapter 3, verses 7 to 12. So this is an example of narrative told in the third person, like a story. Okay. Then I want you to see poetry. Poetry is also in the book of Exodus in chapter 15. You can just kind of thumb through, okay? And then also within literature, you find a prophetic revelation of like telling what the future will be. And you can see this in Genesis chapter 15, verses 12 through 16. If you want to just pause right here, pause the video, and you can go to those passages and read them so that you can get an idea of what we're talking about here. The Pentateuch is the first 5 books, of course, but you also get a history book. You get a history lesson. So it spans from, remember, we're starting with Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy. So in the beginning, in Genesis, you get creation, people come on the scene, and then we're ending Deuteronomy with the death of Moses. Nobody really knows, like when we start off in the book of Genesis, nobody really knows, excuse me, nobody really knows when the earth was formed. Like, who was really there to like jot this down? And we have scientists and things like that that can kind of give dates of when they think parts of the earth were formed, which is good, but all of that is like a guesstimate because it is really, 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 really a mystery. We just don't know how long this earth has been here. Isn't that cool? I mean, wow. And in the Christian faith, we believe that it was created by not a something, but that the earth was created by a someone. So the call of Abram or Abraham to the death of Moses is a time period. And this particular time period is known as the Middle to Late Bronze Ages. And if you just want to Google that also, when we talk about mid to late Bronze Ages, there are artifacts that have been found, especially in like the Middle Eastern African regions, that date back to what they would think would be the Bronze Ages. All right. One of the key things that I want everybody to understand is in the book of Genesis, the first book, starts with the cradle of civilization in Africa. Egyptians are a prominent group of people, brown people, African people who shaped the history of the Pentateuch. Okay. One of the things that is very difficult, even for myself, reading the Old Testament as opposed to the New Testament, it is very confusing. So there are four basic methods that you're going to need to determine. One is a literal or a plain meaning. So some scriptures are just going to say exactly what it means. It is what it is. The second is an allegory, which is a hidden meaning, right? So you may have to dig in it and kind of see what the scripture is really saying. It may not be really clear out to you out front. The third is a moral meaning, meaning that it has something deeper for you to follow. It could be rules, lifestyle. You're going to see a lot of that, especially in the book of Leviticus. Okay, so a lot of morals to telling you how to live your life. You see that a lot too, like moral meanings in the book of Proverbs. And anagogical meaning, anagogical. That's a big word, isn't it? Anagogical meaning focuses on hope and faith, like belief in something else. Anagogical meaning. Okay. So when you read the Old Testament, you want to be sure. I want you to jot down, if you can, also take a picture of this. Look at those four basic methods for determining what does the scripture mean. So if you want to pause this, take a picture of this, or even write these down, this is really good because it's really hard sometimes to understand what the Old Testament means to us right here in 2025. So if y'all stay right there, I'm going to pull up I went over the Pentateuch PowerPoint. And then next, let me go back. So everybody, please make sure that you go to this week. Week 4. I apologize. Remember, we're in week 4. I can't believe we're in November already. And then now I'm going to bring up the Exodus Old Testament PowerPoint. Exodus. So we just went briefly through the Pentateuch. And now I'm going to come back to you with the book of Exodus. Let's see if I can pull this up here. Okay, here we go. Okay, so this is chapter 5 in your textbook. We're going to talk a little bit more about the book of Exodus. So remember, we have Genesis, Exodus. This is the second one in the this is the second book in the Pentateuch. And I apologize, for some reason, these slides are like being compressed. But what's happening here, we follow the Israelite people. So that's the group of people that we're following all across the Old Testament. They have been pushed into bondage. They're now in Egypt. Okay? They're now in Egypt and they're treated horribly and they're forced into slavery. The book of Exodus is really telling and was very, I guess I could say, a bit comforting to those of our enslaved ancestors. Why? Because this particular book of the Bible has a lot of similarities to the struggles that Africans had migrating to the Americas, Central America, wherever they went, due to slavery issues. Many times, if you listen to, if you listen to Negro spirituals, you may hear the name Pharaoh. Okay, tell Pharaoh to let my people go. And that was a comforting type, the Exodus was a comforting type of book to those in bondage, where it was like, okay, God heard them, God responded to those that were in bondage in the Bible, and if God could surely respond to them, God will surely respond to us. And this was a very also popular book that could have also been used during civil rights time as well. Pharaoh could have also been referred to as Jim Crow. Okay. So what does the word Exodus mean? So think about it. Most of us might think about the word exit, leaving or departure. So we want to say, like, who's leaving, who's departing. So remember, the group of people we keep following is the Israelites, the Jewish people, people of Jewish ancestry. Where are they leaving? They're leaving Egypt. Why were they in Egypt? Well, they were put into bondage. They're, captured. They're God's chosen people, but put into bondage by Pharaoh. Now, God doesn't leave them alone. So the book of Exodus, it has a lot of history in it about the Israelite people, and gives a lot of foundation to the Jewish culture. We understand some of the things of why they do what they do, why they have continual celebrations and days of remembrance, because it comes from this particular book. Who wrote the book? So when we talk about authorship, once again, we are really, 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 really not sure like who wrote a lot of the books, but we think, or scholars think, that Moses could have wrote the book. However, some of that could be disputed because some of the passages in Exodus, it seems like he didn't write it. If you go to Exodus 16:31 through 36, it sounds like Moses didn't write it, like somebody else could have written it for him, which I'm sure you might have had a lot of hands in a lot of this writing, excuse me. So once again, you can pause this video, and I want you to do a lot of research here. Like I said, in terms of the background of Exodus, we're not exactly sure who wrote it, and it includes his birth. So yes, Moses could have wrote like about his birth and what he heard, what his mama told him, what the family told him. Absolutely, he sure could have. But it's hard to believe that Moses maybe would have had all of that detail, perhaps. He could have. Maybe he has some good folks that kept some records, but the book does record his birth and a lot of uh, pivotal moments that happened around it. Okay, so I want you to read Exodus chapter 1 and Exodus chapter 2, 1 through 10, to get more of the background of Moses and his birth story. And here's your trivia question. Also, I'm not going to tell you what does Moses's name mean. Okay, why do you think they named him that? I want you to email me. Okay. So Moses is commissioned to be a leader of the Israelite people. In the beginning, Moses is very timid, like, what you calling me for? And God shows favor and calls him to be this leader. And even though he kind of doubts his own leadership, he rises to the occasion. But God shows protection, he shows favor to the Israelite people over and over and over again. But what the book of Exodus shows us, even though they're in a harsh condition, they're in a slavery condition, God judges the people who harm them. What I want you to see is right here in the middle, you will see these letters, and you're like, what is this? Well, this is how Yahweh was written in the Hebrew language. Of course, this is not English, but it was written in Hebrew. So the Old Testament original language is Hebrew. Okay, and this is how the Jewish people wrote it. Now, the Jewish people revered God and feared God so much that they felt it wrong or sinful to write out God's full name. And even to this day, they only would write Y, the H, the W, and the H instead of Yahweh. Okay, instead of writing it all the way out. Yahweh is another name for God. Yahweh is another name for God. And this means, and we talked about multiple names for God, I think last week, but this name Yahweh means God is one of a protector and deliverer. So when we read these different names of God or different titles of God, we see how God acts as protector and deliverer, keeping the Israelite people, providing them with food, traveling with them, keeping them safe. And so the name is very important because we see how God it interacts with the people in that particular task as protector and deliverer. Okay, you can also go to your textbook on page 114 and 115, go to figure 5.2. This talks about the plagues. And remember, I just said previously that God deals with those people who hurt his people. Okay, so what's happening in the book of Exodus? Remember, you've got this big rift between Pharaoh, this nasty ruler who doesn't like the Israelite people, and he's oppressing them, he's hurting them. At that particular time in Egypt, okay, so now I want you to understand that everybody's not worshiping the same way. Everybody is not worshiping God. Everybody is not worshiping Yahweh. In Egypt, they had many other gods, not just one God. Okay, so this is the issue that the Creator God has with Pharaoh. God sent many plagues to disturb the power of Pharaoh because Pharaoh and his people were worshiping these multiple gods. And so there were several plagues, like plague of gnats and boils and frogs, that these particular plagues were all meant to defeat these Egyptian gods. They had more than one. Okay. And so once again, like I said before, American slavery, when we talk about American slavery, slaves often compared the slave master as a pharaoh, right? As an oppressor. Definitely was an oppressor. Okay. Once again, as we get into civil rights, Jim Crow, even though Jim Crow wasn't a real person, but the people that operated in Jim Crow laws, right, and put these Jim Crow laws into play, they were seen as a pharaoh, like a Bull Connor and things like that. Now, when we talk about the Jewish people making sure that they remember things, I want to talk about the Passover. If you get a chance, just go ahead and pause this video. I want you to go to Exodus chapter 12, 21 through 27. Why do the Jewish people celebrate Passover? Why is it so important? And why do they even still celebrate it today? Because it's going to be on the calendar. I want you to see when it's celebrated in, I got the wrong year, but when is it celebrated in 2025? Or was it celebrated in 2025? Or is it coming up? So I want you to get that down. When is it going to be celebrated this year? The Passover ceremony remembers the flight of the Israelites or the Hebrew people from their bondage in Egypt. And God said, I'm going to protect y'all. I'm going to keep you. But what I need you to do is to, if you see the picture right here on the right-hand side, you see something at the top? That was the blood of an animal, a sacrificial animal. Because remember, when we talk about these sacrifices, right? Jesus was not on the scene to atone for any sins. The reason why they would use these animals as sacrifices so much is to atone for their sins. So what these people were instructed to do, what the Israelite people were instructed to do, was to post the animal's blood over their doorpost. And when the angel of death which is what God sent to Egypt, because God was like tired of them playing with his people, that angel of death would pass over their house. Hence, we have the word Passover. Okay. And once again, it is still recognized today because Jewish people of Jewish ancestry say, look at how God brought us through way, 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 way back when, and we won't forget. Won't forget. So we talk about Exodus chapter 20. I want you to go there and start at verse 1, go all the way down to 17, which talks about the 10 Commandments. The 10 Commandments. Many of us have heard of the 10 Commandments. Nowadays we're seeing them posted up on, we see it posted up in some buildings, and even now it's kind of become a political thing to have it put in schools and things. So it's also known as a Decalogue, meaning 10. Moses, the leader of the Israelite people, goes up on Mount Sinai and gets these rules to live by. And there are more than 10 commandments in the Bible, but he gets these rules to live by to help govern to help to guide to help guide the people. Okay. This is just a little food for thought. You can watch this a little bit later. You can watch this video. It discusses the 42 principles of Ma'at. And these are African principles that actually started in Egypt. I want you to read over them because they have a lot of similarities to the 10 Commandments, okay? The 42 principles of Ma'at, okay? They have a lot of similarities to the 10 Commandments, okay? So that took us through an overview of Exodus. I want you to take a look at that. Make sure you're doing your reading. So we went over the chapter on the Pentateuch and a chapter on Exodus, right? All right, everybody, please make sure you do your discussion post for this week. And I hope that you are having a very great day. Please make sure you reach out if you're having any difficulty. Please don't wait till the end. This class will move so fast. Thank you and have a good one.